Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crypto News Podcast. We are buzzing as always, still coming in hot from Mexico. Can't wait to get into this one today. And folks, it's a bit of a rough day here. By the time this episode airs, it will be one full week after Sir Don himself, the Orange Man, Donnie Trump, the President of the United States of America, dropped the bomb on my beautiful country, the neighbors of the North, Canada. Currently in Mexico, as you guys all know, when I get back home, shit is going to get expensive. We are going to get into that today with our incredible guest. But for my Canadian listeners, guys, we are going to endure some pain. Let's hope that we give him what he needs without giving up too much, and we can get these tariffs reversed as soon as possible. But time to get into it. Today we have the one and only Aryan Sheikhalian on the show today, head of research at CMT Digital, and helps with deal sourcing and due diligence as well with the whole team. He joined CMT back in the summer of 2021 during Fund 2, which focused on blockchain research and venture. He started his career at Accenture prior to starting college as a part of the Horizon Scholar Program. Also worked at the Blockchain Research Institute under the leadership of Don Tapscott and graduated from Columbia University in New York City with a BA in economics and mathematics, where he also co-founded the Blockchain Club in the fall of 2017. Super pumped to have you on, Aryan. Welcome to the show, my friend. How you doing this lovely afternoon?
Doing well, Matt. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, excited to chat with a Canadian. Obviously, my roots in crypto started in Canada, so it's always great to chat to another Canadian. And yeah, thank you so much for having me on.
Appreciate it, man. And yeah, shout out to Alex Tapscott and the Tapscott fam, where you did some work with the Blockchain Research Institute, a couple of the Toronto vets and legends there. It's crazy how many crypto guys came from Toronto. Obviously, ETH founded in sort of Waterloo, Toronto. Vitalik and his family, deep roots in Toronto. And to finally come in full circle, we have Consensus this coming May in Toronto, which is going to be super interesting. The one thing that I still really don't get is like Consensus in Toronto, but Toronto as a whole is still like very anti-crypto, and Canada is like still very anti-crypto. And then on top of that, it's like we were the first ones to launch the ETFs. We were the first ones to have publicly traded companies with, crypto exposure. And mind you, Canada as a whole still hates crypto. Sort of weird on that front,
Yeah, it is interesting. I mean, I definitely remember the ETFs in Canada were always ahead. And I used to take the view that America was somewhat lagging behind Canada in terms of crypto adoption. But I guess it's interesting seeing that script be flipped. I wonder if it's going to be permanent or just a temporary switching of roles.
Well said there. Before we get into all the crypto stuff, I mean, we got to talk tariffs. It's very front of mind here. And I'll just give a little preface for the listeners. As many of you know, I was in Argentina in Q4. I got to see it firsthand. Argentina was an incredible country. I loved almost everything about it. But the one thing that was absolutely bananas was the cost of like everyday goods. And obviously they had crazy inflation. I was there in Q4 of 2024. I had a close friend who was there in January of 2024. And across the board, things were 3 times more expensive. 95% of that was due to their inflation. So it wasn't like, you go and you're just filthy rich in Argentina anymore. It was actually very similar to Toronto pricing, which isn't cheap, mind you, either. But the craziest thing was anything imported. If you wanted to buy a MacBook is like $3,000. Like for a baseline MacBook Air, you want to buy an iPhone, it's the same thing. It's like $2,800. AirPods, like $700. You wanted to buy some Nescafe instant coffee for a little afternoon jolt, $21. Like back home in Toronto, that is like, $4 Canadian. In the States, I think it's $2. So it's like anything imported. Part of the reason why Milei did that was to lower the deficit. And he did do a good job of lowering the deficit. We're not big Milei fans right now because he fucked the crypto market, pardon my French. But all that being said, guys, I've experienced the tariffs firsthand. Obviously, inflation was a big chunk of that. But again, anything imported that was not made in Argentina cost an arm and a leg. It was the most expensive I've ever seen in my life. Flipping it over to you, Aryan. What do you think is going to happen with the tariffs? Are these going to be revoked? Is this here to stay? Give me your sort of TLDR as, someone who's big into the markets and big into research.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if they'll be flipped. We'll see. Anything that I add there would be pure speculation. But I guess my interpretation of the tariffs, they're really an attempt from my understanding of lowering that deficit as well. And that does come with that short-term pain. I guess right now the US sources a lot of its original materials used in whether manufacturing or whatever output the US does produce. A lot of that is imported raw materials. And so I think it's a question of how long it takes for that supply chain or how available that supply chain is to be shifted over to the US. And I think that's why we're seeing some large-scale grants programs for onshoring of manufacturing and supply chain kind of origination. Whether or not we see that in the 4-year term, I think is questionable. Obviously, those sort of transformations take much longer to actually realize.
100%.
Yeah, but I do wonder what sort of role crypto and stablecoins specifically will take in that interim period in, I guess, maybe strengthening the US's monetary policy base.
Then thanks for giving me the layup there. The perfect layup into fintech and stablecoin convergence. Stablecoins still probably the biggest use case in crypto present day. Stablecoins along with centralized exchanges. Again, was just in Argentina, saw them use stablecoins every single day. You meet people, they get paid straight away. They convert their ARS, their Argentine currency, which is no bueno, right into Tether, and they hold their Tether. And then they sort of offload that Tether as they need it and use it as a saving mechanism, whatever the case may be. Also, you could pay for stuff, but around the world, stablecoins are absolutely huge. And another point that I'd love for you to touch on before we go for a deep dive into stablecoins, no one in the States has really thanked Paolo, Ardano, and the whole Tether team for like choosing to make the US dollar sort of the payment mechanism of crypto. Cause like just Tether alone has, I think, over 100 billion in T-bills. Like the company does trillions of dollars a year in moving around of the US dollar. Walk me through your guys' sort of thesis on stablecoins, USDT, and how powerful that's truly been for the US dollar.
Yeah, for sure. I think stablecoins is absolutely one of the prime use cases of crypto, especially one that has gained that kind of escape velocity today. And we've seen a massive uptick in stablecoins on chain, US dollars on chain. I think back when USDT and Tether came out with USDT, it was really around, I just think there weren't a lot of alternatives for denomination other than USD for a globally accepted currency. I think it helped that at the time of creation, US dollar was in a pretty different situation than it is at today. I guess less competition from countries like BRICS and currencies like BRICS. And so perhaps it faced a more de facto acceptance in the early days. For us, it was really Circle and USDC that excited us. Having kind of an American company really willing to go to market and kind of bang the drum for stablecoins in the political and kind of business landscapes of the US, I think has been really impactful in the past few years. And we're hoping that that kind of impact only accelerates looking forward.
Continuing on just sort of stablecoins for a quick sec here, I want like specifically the payments part in payments infrastructure. How do you guys see this sort of changing? It's such a quick landscape. And again, I feel like the Trump administration is very pro stablecoins. What kind of like network effects, what kind of implications will this have? And I do feel like in the United States, Circle will, it would make no sense to give, priority to Tether, even though they're much bigger. But I feel like Circle will really be able to make some moves and maybe tie this into the tariffs and the trade. Like, will companies like I think it was Musk with SpaceX that they move hundreds of millions of dollars a quarter, and they settle those with all the payments from different countries and all of the supplies that they're building. They literally settle all those payments in stablecoins and then bring it back onshore. What's your guys' whole thesis on like the future of payments infrastructure in regards to stablecoins?
Yeah, on the Circle and Tether relationship piece first, talking about kind of how this technology is adopted more broadly. I think one of the first initial points is going to be fintech. Fintech companies are naturally positioned as more nimble and able to kind of support these emerging technologies quicker. And fintech companies, we're already seeing them starting to incorporate stablecoins to facilitate just fast, perhaps more secure transactions, and overall just kind of enhancing their payment system, reducing their costs. And so what SpaceX is doing, for example, is super interesting, thinking about kind of reducing their FX risk by using stable coins with currencies that perhaps have more volatility in them. By doing that, they're able to not only expand their coverage, but also I think it's another angle by which the US can lean on dollar supremacy. All of these talks about BRICS, sure, there's a way to circumnavigate the US dollar system, but if you can provide a financial rail system that is fundamentally cheaper and more efficient than traditional systems, but also happens to be denominated in US dollars. That's
huge.
kind of another angle by which US dollars can compete with these emerging BRICS currencies.
Yeah, good point there. Let's take a step back here and jump into CMT Digital, and then we'll continue on some of the big, focus areas of the current fund and what you guys are moving on, which are fintech and stablecoins, AI agents and blockchain as a whole, scaling infra, and of course the Solana ecosystem, which it still has the most users by a country mile, as it looks like from everything I'm seeing on Twitter. Mind you, I haven't really fact checked any of this stuff. It's just, it's present day. What you see on Twitter, you just take to the grave, unfortunately. But before we get into some of the key areas, tell me about CMT Digital Fund 4, what you guys are currently working on, and the current investment strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. So CMT Digital Fund 4 is our fourth fund. Our first fund was launched in 2017. And just for a bit more background, CMT Digital, we exist as a subsidiary of the CMT Group, which is a larger proprietary trading firm based here in Chicago. Fund 4 is really quite similar to investment strategy across other funds. We're looking at blockchain technology and just companies that are operating within the blockchain space. Really, the strategy focuses around identifying areas where blockchain can drive significant innovation and efficiency. And so a lot of the time when we're looking at companies, we're looking at what their function is and how blockchain uniquely improves that function. And that's something that I think is pretty broad. It allows founders to be pretty creative. There are some first principles markets that are ripe for disruption from that first principles perspective. Thinking about things like identity, things that were so enshrined into legacy systems that even disrupting them becomes questionable. And I think that's part of the problem that blockchains have historically faced. Some of the scope of some of its applications are so broad and so far reaching.
Well said.
That
well said.
To actually disrupt it requires multiple cycles and multiple attempts, creating those integrations, creating those kind of business relationships that allows that broader business scale transformation to be achieved.
Well said. One of the lines I loved in your guys' sort of memo for CMT Digital Fund 4 is that you guys view blockchain as the everything technology. And like if I'm putting my feet in the shoes of an investor, I know VC firms, PE firms, you guys love to like sort of put things into silos, put things into buckets where it's like, all right, what's this company's comparable? Like what is their TAM? How can we sort of measure the Matt and Aryan new idea, new startup versus all of its competitors? Whereas the blockchain, like you said, we're just sort of like taking every single idea known to mankind and being like, we're going to tokenize it. We're going to put it on the blockchain. We're going to add Web3 tech to it. Like it really is broad as shit. Do you think, how far away are we from actually finding like a greater PMF, product market fit, when it comes to really just like technologizing everything?
Yeah, I think it differs from sector to sector, right? Some sectors are going to stand to be disrupted more from blockchain than others. There are some sectors that blockchain just isn't as applicable to. And I think it's important realizing that and realizing exactly what blockchain will be solving for each specific use case.
Yeah.
And so if we compare it to the Web 2 transformation that we saw back in the .com era, you kind of had this shifting of business models. Let's look at iTunes. This is an example that I think is pretty interesting. iTunes kind of tried to tack on a legacy business model onto a new distribution service. You still had to buy the albums, you still had to buy the individual songs, and you own them, just not in the sense that you held the physical CD.
It wasn't physical, yeah.
What Spotify did was change that business model to match the distribution mode. So instead of, there was no reason to actually own the songs and the CDs in the same way that you did before. You could just pay for the service that you were receiving. And so it changed that business model from owning to being a consumer to the servicing business almost. And I think we haven't really seen that broadly in blockchain and crypto. And I think that's one of its most interesting applications. Crypto and blockchain really largely aligns incentives and programs incentives into the protocol. And if you can use that to disrupt legacy business models, I think that's really interesting. And I think that's somewhere that AI and crypto, so for example, uniquely stand to benefit. It forces the consumer to ask the question of something like, are credits, are tokens for API calls for inference the right way of doing it? Or does something like proof of useful work as a consensus mechanism in the context of AI then allow you to, pay for only the inference responses that you get that are useful to you.
Do you think that's what's needed to sort of hit that mass, killer consumer app? Like it has to be something novel and something very niche instead of just like, but then again, I was going to say instead of just adding a new layer to something, but that's really all that, Uber did or all that Spotify did was just sort of take an existing model and just make it a little better.
Right.
Do we need to create something completely novel to go like truly, truly viral and for all the masses to use us? Or do we, like stablecoins perhaps, but then again, even stablecoins, it's really just taking something that we use every day and making it a little better. Is that really the secret sauce here to go mainstream?
I think it's taking something that already exists and making it better, whether that's by adding if you're lucky enough in that the fundamental market underneath already works and that you can just make it better by adding a layer on top of it. I would say Spotify, for example, added a layer on top of music that allowed you to have access to music for far cheaper on a per unit economics basis than you would before. And I think, for example, if you could do that with AI inference by baking in some proof of useful work, consensus mechanism, for example, that could result in a situation where your inferences are over the cost of a month far cheaper. And so that you're somewhat forced to use it. But then there are some markets that I think are fundamentally misaligned on the incentives. And I think that's where the market penetration becomes harder. And I think that's where the time to realization becomes longer. I think arguably that's why we're seeing stablecoin adoption preceding everything else, because it's a industry and it's a process that has existed in its kind of current form for many decades. It's just the ledger by which we're tracking these things is changing. And that really is another layer. So
well said. Mate, you're on a roll here. We got to take a quick break. Give a huge shout out to our sponsor of the show, Prime XBT. And when we get back, we are going to keep jumping into the investment strategy of CMT Digital. And we are going to talk about the state of crypto VC and emerging investment opportunities. Until then, huge shout out to Prime XBT, longtime friends and longtime sponsors of the Crypto News podcast. We love the team at Prime XBT as they offer a robust trading system for both beginners and professional traders. It doesn't matter if you're a rookie or a vet, you can easily design and customize your layouts and widgets to best fit your trading style. Prime XBT is also running an exclusive promo for listeners of the Crypto News podcast. Use the promo code CryptoNews50, that is CryptoNews50, all one word, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Again, that is CryptoNews50, all one word, CryptoNews50, to receive 50% of your deposit credited to your trading account. Mate, let's jump into the state of crypto VC right now. I think being a VC is super cool, like a lot of people. I mean, you guys get to, you work your ass off on the research side of things, and then you get to talk to a bunch of very smart and ambitious girls and guys, and then you get to make bets on them. It seems pretty friggin' fun. I have a couple buddies who are in the space. They absolutely love it. And I think it's really damn cool. And throwing the ball over to your court here, what is the current state? Are we still having, I know I don't want to say we're in a bear market, but we might be entering a bear market. I know the Trump tariffs have sort of tanked the market in a little bit just because everyone's sort of sidelined and wants to know which rules, the rules of engagement and how they can play the game. But, is there still a lot of VC crypto capital funding? What areas are most trendy? What's the sexy stuff? What's everyone looking at? Walk me through all that.
Yeah. So I've been a VC for about 4 years now. I really enjoy it. I really love talking to founders, talking to people who are passionate about technology and specifically passionate about enacting change within an area that they think that they can uniquely enact change. The state of VC today is a very interesting one, and one that I think we haven't ever really been in this market, in the market of crypto. We have broad regulatory support with the current administration, but we have a macro environment that is very averse to risk on assets, and crypto is fundamentally a risk on asset. And so the regulatory and adoption kind of piece, I don't think we could have necessarily asked for a better setup, but the macro landscape is definitely pushing against us. What that means for VCs, there are VCs that have a lot of dry powder still. We just did our first close for Fund 4 and we're deploying out of that. So we are definitely sitting on dry powder and looking for opportunities. I think for founders, the mission statement hasn't really changed. And if anything, only provides a great environment for them to then build. especially with that upcoming regulatory clarity, they can already start to anticipate some of the things that they might expect there. But the core mandate has not changed in the sense that we're still looking for just untapped opportunities where blockchain can uniquely address existing inefficiencies. And some of those that we're starting to see come to fruition are those cross-border payments, remittances, stablecoin networks that we've been anticipating for many years. I really like self-ownership and the ability for you to custody something yourself that blockchain brings to the market. And I think that first really took off with Bitcoin. You know, the reason that people understood Bitcoin is it's an asset that you can custody yourself without relying on any middleman and this trust in banks. But I think that extends much further out. And so the long tail of blockchain opportunities really extends to self-ownership of data, self-ownership of pretty much everything associated with yourself. And the productization of that we're looking for that is really exciting to me is unknown. It's really what benefits come from in each sector being able to custody something yourself. In gaming, you know, there's speculation about that being a marketplace for in-game assets. It's just such a broad change to the status quo that it provides an opportunity for a lot of creative ways of capturing the market or achieving that market penetration. And I think that's what we're seeing, or what we have seen in the crypto space over the past 3-4 years. Even meme coins to a degree are that.
Yeah.
Meme coins really were the result of allowing anyone to become an issuer of anything. And it's really that decentralized protocol governance-based, rule-based approach that allows anyone to issue anything within the constraints of those rules. Now, Pumped Up Fund didn't have many rules, but expanding that to beyond the initial speculative use cases of meme coins, that's where I think things start to get pretty interesting. And, you know, one thing that we track pretty closely is developer activity in the space. Electric Capital has a fantastic report that they do every year. And if you look at the emerging developers and the established developers and the newcomer developers in the Electric Capital developer report, established developers in the space outnumber newcomer and emerging developers for the first time in the history of kind of blockchain development. And
wow,
I think that's part of the reason that we're in this weird space as VCs, because the regulatory environment's great, but we're not seeing the building activity that we would have expected. And part of that reason, we think, is because the newcomer developers that have entered the ecosystem over a 6-month period following a BTC all-time high hasn't happened yet. And so we're looking for that inflow of newcomer developers to really kickstart the next wave of really exciting, perhaps transformative applications that we haven't seen yet.
Wow, that I would not have expected that. Mate, you're making my head spin here. Wow, I got a lot of homework to do myself, and this has been incredibly insightful. Speaking of developers, again, from what I've seen on Twitter, and Aryan, I have not fact-checked this myself, so this could be completely fugazi, but I follow all the news accounts on Twitter. Of course, I work for Crypto News as well. We are fortunate enough to work with the Dune team, and, you know, we get a lot of really unique and incredible dashboards. From what I've seen personally, it seems like a good chunk of the users present day are still using the Solana blockchain. Obviously, a big chunk of that was meme coins, but there's still tons of DeFi. You have DePIN, you have RWA. Is Solana here to stay? Obviously Solana has the incredibly high TPS. In my opinion, I still think it's the best blockchain to onboard new users. If the easiest way to onboard, you know, a normie is to get them into meme coins or DeFi. If you use ETH, it's a little bit of a pain in the ass. It's a little clunky. It's a little expensive. Use Solana. It's pretty clean. It's pretty cheap. It's pretty sleek. It's pretty sexy. That's just my opinion. That's the opinion of my normie friends as well. But what's your opinion on the Solana blockchain, noting the crazy volatility and the huge drop that we've seen in the last couple of weeks?
Yeah. You know, I think Solana did a lot for the space in terms of usability, just in terms of, I mean, gas fees, for example, such a basic consideration for using a blockchain. And I think the effect of having that incredibly low gas fee, incredibly high throughput chain made itself apparent in the past few years, just in terms of its adoption. Yeah, Solana does lead as one of the most active blockchains, but if you compare them, I'd say not all blockchains really look to serve the same purpose.
Yeah, well said.
If you compare Ethereum, Solana, And something like Near, for example, I really like the Near tech stack. I don't think Near has gone to market nearly as well as something like Solana has. But if you look at who Solana serves, who Ethereum serves, and who Near serves, they're three very different user groups. Solana's catering to the individual retail, perhaps
consumer, yeah.
Pretty technically savvy consumer who is able to spin up their own wallet, sign transactions on their own, and do it multiple times a day as they're spending kind of a good amount of their time in the trenches, so to speak. But then Solana doesn't have the same access to liquidity that something like Ethereum does today.
Exactly.
If you look at Ethereum, you have more of the buttoned up DeFi, perhaps institutional repackaging of products type engagement at the cost of having a certain amount of size, requiring a certain amount of size for it to be economically viable for you to exist solely on Ethereum. And then Near on the other end of the spectrum is just kind of a blockchain for serving applications as opposed to their end users. And it becomes an infrastructure stack for the applications to serve their end users. Near, I think, has millions of daily users, but I don't think any of the users even know that they're interacting with a blockchain, because it's through Web2 applications
that's the problem with B2B though. It's so hard to scale a B2B crypto company because it doesn't get any coverage. No one gives a shit, like unless very good things and very bad things are happening and you're using it, you don't know about it. So it's like I'm a Near bag myself. It hasn't done anything in forever, but
no,
I still understand that it has a good chance at doing something if they sort of figure out that marketing.
But ultimately, does it matter?
It's tough.
Yeah, ultimately, I would say it is tough, especially if, the projects that have gone to market in that very flashy, immediate onboarding way have really benefited. But if you structure the tokenomics of your protocol with some end goal in mind, then I would argue that the time between A and B being the end goal being reached, kind of what happens there doesn't really matter.
Good point.
If let's say we say Near's tokenomics model becomes deflationary beyond some certain usage, as long as those users, as long as the platform bringing those users to the protocol is willing to pay for that activity, then I would argue it doesn't matter. I guess the fundamental question then becomes, are there enough applications willing to pay?
Interesting. That's a very good point there. Very good point.
One thing I do want to add for Solana that I think is really interesting, I think Solana is in a very interesting position. I think they're in a very strong position. And I think even what they're doing on the infrastructure side is looking to iterate on Solana's stack in a way that Ethereum didn't really when it was given the opportunity.
Yeah.
So something very specific I want to bring attention to is something like network extensions. Ethereum introduced layer 2s to scale the throughput of the chain. But in doing so, there's all these arguments about L2s being parasitic to Ethereum. I wouldn't agree with that. I would say, those L2s allow activity that otherwise wouldn't have occurred on Ethereum to exist. And if they're posting blob space, sure, the value accrual may not be huge, but it's definitely not zero. And de minimis is still above zero.
Yeah.
But they never differentiated their block space. They never offered different block space for different users, for different types of users. Yeah. And I think that's where Solana is iterating. So network extensions, and I've got a piece op-ed on this that's going to be published in the next week here, hopefully. Solana network extensions are very similar to Ethereum L2s from an architectural perspective, but they share the same validator base. They share the same kind of liquidity corridors, but they allow actually meaningfully differentiated block space in the sense that you can build different consensus mechanisms. You can build different finality times. You can build different slashing required conditions. You can kind of structure it exactly how you want. And I think that meaningfully changes the different types of block space that Solana is then able to offer. And so the amount of shopping around that applications need to do to find suitable block space for their project, I think then becomes drastically lower if they already exist on Solana and these alternative execution environments becoming available.
Very well said there. I think Sol is going to continue to grow. Again, it's just tough with retail sentiment. Only industry in the world, to my knowledge, where, retail and one siloed sort of, town square, i.e. X or Twitter, has so much power. It's wild, but c'est la vie, it's the world we're living in. The last topic here, mate, that I'd love to get into is we're getting a little tight for time. AI agents. couple months ago, I mean, heck, Q4 last year, everyone was like, AI agents going to transform the future, going to be absolutely incredible. I still think they're awesome. I still think we're very early in the space. I still think we got a lot of work to do. I still love, seeing them on Twitter, seeing them on X rather. You have virtuals that everyone was like, oh, it's the next big thing, multi-billion dollar market cap. It's like, it's sort of dropped. Does this really enhance blockchain? Like, are agents going to help us, secure the payment rails and all that kind of stuff, decentralized inference, and maybe just segue into, are we going to see a world? We are. I guess the better question is, when are we going to see a world where I can just talk to an agent and be like, buy this SOL for me, stake it, and, send me an update every morning? Like, how far away are we from agents actually doing really cool needle moving stuff instead of just sort of being a news aggregator present day?
Yeah. It's a great question. I have a lot of thoughts on this topic. With AI agents, I think there's been a little bit of disagreement, should we say, in terms of what the purpose of crypto X AI should be. A lot of people say, it's immediate just wallet access and being able to send money, transact as an agent. And I think looking at technologies like Stripe's API and looking at kind of traditional rails, there's no reason why they wouldn't be able to use those rails, especially if we ignore the kind of transaction fee, which I'm assuming these rails providers are pretty incentivized to kind of optimize to allow them to be able to transact using their API.
100%.
I'd argue that the use case for blockchain and AI is definitely more fundamental than that, but that the technology hasn't gotten there to allow that to be commercializable at scale. Back in 2021, I was researching AI and blockchain. Some of the projects like BitTensor, some of the projects like Akash, they'd been working on various elements of inference, training, compute, data, all the kind of components of AI. And I'd argue that effort was somewhat hijacked by the speculative nature of something like virtuals, because it drew the attention and liquidity away from the research-based projects to the short-term speculative-based projects. And I'd say it's an inevitability for the fundamentals to permeate through in the long run. Let me give you one example. Something like data. Data is so key to this piece because decentralized compute only is strictly better than centralized compute if the data is decentralized. But the data is decentralized. Data naturally exists in a decentralized way. But right now, we can't really train over decentralized data in a manner that's privacy preserving. Even with ZK proofs, at some point, someone has to see the data. And I'm not sure if crypto economic security alone can cover the scope of that kind of risk. But something like TEEs, and that's just one example of a technology that could apply here. I know NVIDIA is doing quite a lot of work there. A lot of the hardware providers are doing work on optimizing TEEs for training processes. I think it requires that sort of advancement on the hardware level to be able to realize the technical opportunity that then provides the business opportunity, because the business opportunity is really realigning those incentives into a protocol that makes sense, incentivizing the contribution of data whilst also being able to provide a technical backbone that ensures your privacy. I think you need both. And I'd say that while we have the incentives piece, I don't think we're quite there yet on knowing how the tech is going to work.
What a great end to the show, man. Look, you were on a roll. Mate, I got to have you on for round 2. I know we barely scratched the surface here, and I promise we'll do this sooner rather than later, but we are getting tight for time here. Any news that you guys have coming out over the next couple of weeks, months? I know you are launching that Solana op-ed. That should be live by the time this episode airs on Monday, March 10th. Any other news or any, I'm sure you guys can't really say who you're investing in, but anything you'd like to drop before we let you go?
Yeah, Oliver Jarvis from our team just put out a great piece on AI agents as well. AI agent frameworks in crypto. He worked on that with Decentralized Co. I think that was a really good overview of kind of how we feel about AI agents. The Solana op-ed is coming. I'm also writing a piece on incentive mechanisms, specifically looking at the tragedy of the commons within economics and how kind of crypto can be used to solve that broadly. But yeah, definitely looking at projects. There's a few exciting announcements coming out in the coming weeks here about companies that we're excited about. And yeah, just if you have any questions about CMT on Telegram as Persian Pariah, I was originally an immigrant from Iran, which is why my name is Persian Pariah.
I love that.
And yeah, would be happy to chat. Just thank you so much for having me on, Matt. And yeah, looking forward to speaking again in the future.
Appreciate it. And as always, folks, we will drop all the socials, website, and all important things in the show notes. Huge shout out to Aryan for coming on the show, head of research at CMT Digital. Hope you guys enjoyed this one. We touched a little bit of everything. Their investment strategy, some emerging investment opportunities, the state of crypto VC, stablecoins, fintech, AI agents, scaling infra, the SOL ecosystem, and of course the implications of the tariffs. Huge shout out to Aryan and the team for making this happen. If you guys enjoyed this one, I hope you did. Please do subscribe. It would mean the world to my team and I. Speaking of the team, love you guys. Thank you so much for everything. And back to listeners, keep on growing those bags, touch a little grass, and keep on staying healthy, wealthy, and happy. Appreciate you guys tuning in as always, and we will see you on the next one. Ciao.